Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary. Hey guys, hope you're having an awesome day and trying hard not to tie people from the Enneagram method, but rather understanding your own number and your spouse's number so that way you could understand each other on much deeper levels. Why are you doing this? And what's motivating you? And how can you work together and support each other? I hope you're enjoying that one. Today, we are going to speak to someone really cool. Someone who is half black, half white, and married a Korean. He also runs a podcast called Time for Your Hobby and interviews people on interesting hobbies and how it affects their life. Thank you so much, Alex Hobbies, for being here. I am so excited to speak with you again. I am super curious to know, how does a half black, half white person end up marrying a Korean lady? How does that work?
So growing up, I've always, the idea is like, oh, you gotta stick to your own kind of thing. And being multiracial, that's really hard to find someone your own kind. And I was just attracted to pretty much anyone. Well, that sounds weird saying that like that, but I mean, I kept my horizon open because I didn't really see somebody like, oh, I have to, because they're an apple, I have to be an apple. Apples go together. It was like more like apple and oranges go together. Sometimes happens. So I've dated around different other people before, different ethnicities, different cultures. And when I met my now wife, when we did meet, it was just a casual conversation. I didn't have the intention of dating her, marrying her, or anything like that. It was just meeting new friends. And then she contacted me a couple of days later, and then we started connecting that her ex-boyfriend was French and my ex-girlfriend was Korean. So we connected on that, and we kind of just met up more. Our first date was at a thrift shop.
That's a really interesting place. Okay, one second. First, how did you meet her? And then how did you line up in the thrift shop?
Okay, so how I met my wife is actually I was interested in another girl first. And I asked her out. And she's like, no, you're not my type. And I'm the type of dude that's like, you know what? You tell me no, cool. I'm not going to try to push it. I'm not going to do that. So that's fine. Leave it at that. But we did have plans the next day to go eat at a restaurant. The girl, her friend, and my now wife, and they were all kind of friends. And then my wife was not necessarily friends with the girl I asked out, but we're all four out. I came late and I sat at the table, and those two were speaking to each other in Lao, so from Laos. And my wife, let's call her G. My wife G was just sitting in front, and I'm a very social person. I love just talking to people. I understand guys and girls can be friends. I don't see anything wrong with that. And she was the girl I asked out. It was a little awkward, but I try to make it diffuse and just say, okay, you tell me no, I'm not your type, cool. And we just talk. And then I was talking to G, and we just connected. And then we went to go see a light show on the hill. And then I just walked them all back to the hostel where they were living. And that was that. Didn't do anything else. And then a couple of days later, G contacts me because she wanted to have a Canadian friend because she was coming from Korea just to visit. And
then you were in Canada?
Yes, I was in Canada.
Okay.
So I'm born and raised in Canada. And I was just showing them the city. And then I just walked them back to the hostel they were living in. And that was that. My wife, G, contacted me a few days later just to make a Canadian friend. And then we just connected. And then our first date comes per se. Let me explain something. So I'm a guy, and that sounds stereotypical, but I'm stupid. When I think somebody's interested in me, I'm like, oh, wow, that seems like somebody's interested in me because, like I said before,
it's not stupid. It's just the way guys' brains work. It's a slight difference.
If you ask my wife, it's stupid. But so what happened was her ex-boyfriend, like I said, was French, and my ex-girlfriend was Korean. So we were talking about that, and then she's like, oh, well, you should do a language exchange. What I thought I understood is that, oh, we should do a language exchange. And I'm like, oh, okay. But she only meant actually speaking, sharing the language. And then we did that once, and that was it. And the reason why we went to the thrift store is because she had just arrived from Korea, and then it was around October, September. And trying to figure out, she said she had no winter jacket because her mom sent it by boat, which was going to come in 3 months. And she was asking me, do you know anywhere where you can get a winter jacket, like really cheap, like a thrift store? I'm like, yeah, actually, I have the day off. Here, let's go. She's like, no, 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 no. I'm like, no, come on, it's no problem. I'm very friendly. I like to like help out. So we drove and went to the thrift store. We spent a few hours there just trying stuff, looking at stuff. And then we went to have pizza. And that was our first date. And we've been together for, what, 7 years now? I met her when I was 21. She was 27.
Oh, wow. Okay. So how did you deal with that 6-year gap, especially that she's older than you and usually it's the other way around?
Honestly, after the age of 20, for me, it doesn't really matter. It goes with the maturity, the connection with the person. And to this day, I keep forgetting the age difference because either I'm really mature or she's immature or I'm immature. But we just connect very well. And she looks younger than me too. So that's what fools me. When she said, oh, she was born in this year, I'm like, no, that can't be. But yeah, the age difference doesn't bother me at all. Like we're talking, we're like, all right, we're 6 years difference. Wow.
Does it ever affect the dynamic of like the man of the house, but the fact that she's older and like, okay, whose job is this? How you meant to play things out here?
Kind of like the patriarchy kind of idea.
Yeah.
No, age doesn't play a role. Like we both know we have strong abilities in certain things and weak abilities in certain things, so we try our best to try to complement each other. It's no one is the boss, and of course my son's gonna be born in a month, so
Congratulations! By the time this airs, he's gonna be born already. So
there you go. So that's gonna like probably change a whole lot of trying to figure out what are our new roles and how we're gonna play them. So it's a lot of communication, and especially being in a relationship where, how would you say it, where the language barrier might be a thing. It's really important to throw communication into it. And we've learned this at an early stage.
Okay, so what communication tips could you give to our listeners?
So when you're in an argument, just keep in mind that the person might be coming from a different point of view. So acknowledge what that person is trying to convey. So for me, in my arguments, I can be hard-headed. That's a given. But during an argument, I always kind of like to say, okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. This is what you're saying. So I always say, correct me if I'm wrong, if I am wrong. Most of the time, but it's the idea that
softens things up. Yeah,
exactly. Acknowledge that your point is being heard. So I try to repeat what they're trying to say. If I am wrong, they correct me, and I go and I say, okay, well, this is what you're saying. This is what I'm saying. For my wife and I, sometimes when we have arguments, we get into like sometimes, let's say, deep arguments, and then I use a word because English and French are both technically my first languages. But when I use a word she doesn't know, we're full arguing. Then she's like, what does that mean? And I go, well. Actually means this. I completely break my anger just to explain to her the word.
It breaks the pattern. Yes.
Because in my mind, I'm like, all right, well, I want her to be on the same playing field. So I want her to understand this word. So I'm just going to explain it. I don't explain it in a condescending kind of way. I literally just break the tension, kind of like, well, the word that means this. So then you ready? Ready? All right. Let's go back. No, kidding.
No, it's not the same. Right. So that's why anyone listening, even if you don't have a different language that you can't do, you could like ask a random question about something else that will make the person say like, as long as it doesn't make them angry, I'll just make them like stop and think like, hey, what? And we'll break that anger that you're trying to break. Yeah.
I have a friend who does, instead of saying like a random question, he uses a word that they made up, like kugalagoo. Oh. Like they just made up the word. It just breaks the tension. It's kind of like saying that, okay, we've both gone too far.
And it's like funny enough they can like laugh and giggle about it and say like, go from the extreme anger to the funny.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I like that. Okay. Now, how do you deal with the cultural difference? There's the language barrier, but then there's the whole cultural part to it.
The cultural part, it was a little tough at first. But that's for everybody when you're introducing new culture. Korea, there's a lot of spicy food. So I'm half black, half white, and my black side is from Barbados and Trinidad, and spicy food's popular there too, but I can't tolerate spicy food. So when I went to go visit, let's say, my wife's parents in Korea for the first time, I had to try to put on my best effort to tolerate the spicy food. I didn't want to insult and like just smile. And when it comes to cultural difference, let's say when I did go visit my wife's parents for the first time before we were married, they don't speak English very well or at all, and I don't speak Korean. So we were staying there for 2 weeks. So it was really important for me to use the body language aspect. So I talk with my hands and make sure that I present myself well. And it's a little bit of a give and take. So she tries to understand a little bit of like the Canadian culture here, and I try to understand the Korean culture. Like at first, Canadians before the pandemic hugged a lot, or French Canadians did the kiss, like kind of like that. And Koreans don't necessarily do that. So it's kind of odd for her. And there's different mannerisms where we both kind of like just try to understand each other. And this literally goes with time, just communication and time. Asking questions, curiosity is really the thing that expanded our minds with culture. And in a way, our son's going to probably fuse both those cultures together in a sense.
How do you view what your relationship will look like once you have your son? Obviously, you can't really know, but if you had to envision it, what would you say it would look like?
At first, no sleep, as every normal human parent. And then after that, I think the biggest challenge for us will be trying to convey three languages to our son. And we will both fight because there's how she's raised, because we both haven't, like right now, we're doing man, woman. This is our relationship. But when you add a child, then we're bringing aspects that are taught from our parents that we haven't taught before. So once again, we've talked about this, that we know we're going to disagree on certain parental methods. So it's important that we just take the time to communicate, and some give and takes. Like sometimes she'll say something like, you know what, I'll let you teach that to our son. And then she'll be like, oh, you know what, I'll let you teach this to our son. Just a few things give and take. But ideally, there are certain things that are common. We want our son to be respectful towards other people, and it's going to be tough for our relationship at first. I think that's for every parent. I don't think any parent is like, oh, this has been so easy, a breeze. The baby poops on command, goes to sleep when I snap my fingers. Yeah, it's going to be interesting in the relationship. But honey, you think we're going to be good? Okay, she's not listening. Perfect.
She's too busy worrying about it. What would it be like?
Yeah. She's like not shaking her like, no, Alex, no.
You know what they say, that if they have parents who speak two different languages, I don't know about three, but if it's two, then each parent should only speak one language to the kid, and then the kid will know this is all part of the same language instead of mixing them both up together. But it's really cool. Don't give it up, okay?
No.
Seen so many parents tried, and then like after a few weeks they like gave up and the child only knows one language. Apparently they say like it develops the brain better and things like that.
Technically we have 4 languages in the house.
What 4 languages?
We have English. I speak English, French. My wife actually she's trilingual, so she speaks Korean, English, and Japanese.
Oh, cool. Japanese she knows fluently? Or like just understands? That is way too
fluent.
Cool.
Yeah. So I don't think we're going to teach him Japanese just yet. We're going to start with the 3. So I'm going to speak French to my son, and my wife's going to speak Korean. And when we're together in the same room, we're going to speak English to each other.
That is smart. You guys all worked out. I see you're all ready for it.
In theory, it's good, but once applied, it might just go completely the wrong way.
Yeah, I need to like speak to you again in 6 months and find out what happened. Yeah. Okay, so now how has your relationship changed over the past 7 years?
When it first started, a lot of the arguments was due to miscommunication. So that was something that's big, but now it's more understanding. We're a lot more patient with each other. So we understand certain things. We're more lenient on, okay, well, this is probably not what they meant. This is how they're approaching it. This is their point of view. We somewhat share more similar thought process on how we want to be treated with the other people or raise a child and stuff like that. But there's always little differences, but we tend to have similar interests. The only thing that we don't necessarily share is hobbies. So, and that's fine. We don't have to share every single little thing. The only hobby that we do together sometimes is go hiking. That's about it. But right now she's pregnant, so we're not necessarily hiking. We're doing little pregnancy walks just to get the blood flowing. But other than that, a lot more of the arguments when it first started off was a lot more about miscommunication, and especially in a relationship where there's a language barrier, miscommunication is a pretty big factor to start a lot of the arguments. Even if you speak the same language, miscommunication is probably the biggest factor for all arguments. I could be wrong, but
yeah, for a lot of them. And I think it starts before that. It goes with self-awareness, but I think you have a lot of it. That's what it sounds like. Out of curiosity, you, the hobby guy, what is your favorite hobbies and what's her favorite hobbies?
So for myself, my favorite hobbies are podcasting, for sure. And
like me.
Yes, podcasting. I also produce music as well, rap. I sing. My wife says I don't sing. I like to play football, or as other people refer to as soccer. I used to do track and field. And as for my wife, she just picked up painting maybe a couple months ago. She likes writing in her journal. She likes walking, singing, playing the piano. So there are like the music aspect is there, the commonality, but, and it's completely normal for relationship and couples to have different hobbies. You don't have to share every single thing together.
Yeah, I
And
think
we
it's
try to be supportive. Yeah.
exactly. Try to be supportive. I think it's about being you're each own individual person and supporting each other. Yeah, exactly. Now, do you think any of the way that you come up in your relationship is because of the way your parents behave together, or completely not?
A little bit of yes and a little bit of no. Like there's certain things my parents do I don't agree with, and that had a major impact on who I am as a person. And there's certain things I don't want to pass down to my children, and I know my wife has the same mentality for her parents. So, but as you get older, you kind of see sometimes you reflect similar personalities as your parents did. I'm sure you've gone through that too, where you're like, oh, my mother does this. What? My father does this. What? And it's kind of like, oh, now I understand them.
Question is if then you like it and you understand it, or then you say, no, I did this by mistake and I have to find a way to fix that.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. Like it's a force of habit. You're like, oh no, I hate that I do this. Let's say, for example, if guilt trip. I hate guilt trip, but my mom is pretty good at it. But to a certain point, I'm like, no, I'm done. I don't want it. I don't think I've ever done it, but like in the back of my mind, I'm trying to always say, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it at any point. And I've seen stuff growing up, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that from my parents. And then when I'm about to do it, I'm like, nope, Alex, think, stop, think. And actually, this goes back to like when I have arguments with people, I always think, will you regret saying this later on? So I always like put myself, even if I'm super angry, I always try to put myself in a position like, all right, it's not going to be beneficial. It's going to be beneficial for the moment, but not for the long term. And then I learned that from like my parents who have said things, and it had a longer effect. And my wife did the same thing with her parents. So yeah, you don't want to be your parents, but you do at the same time. And then sometimes you have habits from your parents that you do want, but then some that you don't want, that you get anyways. So it's a lot about self-realization.
Yeah, a whole lot of that. And it seems like you have a whole lot of self-control. So to be able to just stop and think,
Yeah, that's
I'd
why I'm
like some
bald.
of
It's just
yours.
the stress. I just control myself by losing the hairs. Like,
Okay, that's the trick.
Yeah.
I think we mentioned this a bit before, but I don't know if it's a bit different. What was your biggest challenge in your relationship?
The biggest challenge I would have to definitely say was the language barrier.
Mm-hmm.
And because there are certain things that aren't necessarily translated in certain languages, like expressions or words. And it was we really had to work on our patience in order to figure out what the other person is saying. So on my behalf, on her behalf as well, especially I have to be more patient because English is not her first language. So she puts a lot of effort trying to find out words, what they mean or how to phrase them. So I can't just jump to conclusion and assume that she's stupid or doesn't know what she's saying. It's that she's very smart. She knows what she's saying. It's just the idea of formulating the sentence. And especially during an argument, sometimes it can be hard for any individual to formulate a concrete sentence that makes sense without letting emotions and rage or whatever jumps into play. So it's definitely the miscommunication and the actual communication aspect that was the biggest challenge. Still, it's a little present, but we're more patient now than we were 7 years ago.
Yeah, it sounds like you really grew in this relationship. Now, what do you wish you would have known before you got married?
Korean. Definitely Korean. So I would be able to give her an even playing field, but language has been a very tough thing for me. So I'm dyslexic, and even with the French language, I struggle with that. Even though it's my first language,
Well, it's a
I
really
feel
hard
like,
language, French.
yeah, and I feel like I'm losing it a little bit. Even though I work in French, I write in French, I went to university in French. Like I'm concerned that I'm not gonna teach French well to my son. So that's one of my concerns. But yes, if I had the ability to learn a language instantly, I'd like to learn Korean so I can communicate with my wife better, communicate with my parents-in-law. And I know it's an excuse saying, oh, well, you should put some effort into it. Learning new languages has always been a struggle. Even mastering my own languages has been a struggle for me.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Did you learn any Korean or totally not, like you only speak in English?
I've learned a few words. I know how to sing happy birthday, which is
Of course.
whenever it's a family member's birthday in Korea, I'm like, oh, let me sing happy birthday. Let me sing happy birthday just to show off. I knew another few words, like basic words, like I love you, thank you for food, no, yes, like very basic. But interestingly enough, I think I'm going to have the same situation as my father did. My father spoke English only. And then once I was born, he started picking up French because he was learning as I was going and he was learning the words I was saying. So I think that's going to happen. And like for my wife, I think it's going to be the same way, but for French. So she's going to hear our son speaking French.
That's really interesting.
So we're going to have our own little translator.
Yeah, kids are the greatest teachers now. Awesome. Okay, now last question. What advice could you give to our listeners to have an extraordinary relationship?
Best advice I could give you, and I'm sure a lot of people have given this advice before, is be patient. And if, let's say, you are having an argument, instead of just sticking to your guns, it's okay to be wrong. You're not going to win a prize to be in first place or to be right. Admitting you're wrong shows your compassion, shows empathy, sympathy, or it shows that you're human to a certain degree. So it's okay. Like I like to think, and when I'm wrong, I admit when I'm wrong. Sometimes my wife says no, sometimes she's like, okay, yeah, you do. But I feel like it's in the longer run, it's okay to admit you're wrong. Because if you just bottle that in the whole life, you're going to blow up again. So actually, that was one of my problems before, is that I used to bottle everything in. And my wife's like, you gotta let that out. You gotta just not just bottle in as you go, just let it out. Not just like, I hate you doing that. Just kind of like take your time.
In a healthy way. Yeah.
In a healthy way. Exactly. So my best advice, I'd say, is be patient, because you're human. You only have so much time to live. Enjoy that time. You don't want to just keep that all bottled up. You want to just release it as you go, and it actually helps you grow.
Yeah, it's really hard for people. I'm sure you could relate to it. People who've always bottled up their emotions and let it out, but it's so worth it.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. It was great speaking to you.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time. I had no idea what to expect, but you asked the perfect questions. It was a smooth conversation, and you just like, all right, next one. I like that. And it really felt like time just flew by.
Yes, same here. It was awesome. Guys, go check out Alex's podcast. It's called Time for Your Hobby. It's a really cool podcast where every week he has a different guest on who shares their interesting hobby. I was actually recorded to go on, but it's only going to go out in like a year's time because Alex is so organized and he knows that he's having a baby and he wants it set and all prepared for when life gets busy and he doesn't get much sleep at night. And I did a really cool one on people watching. Yes, I have this thing. I love people watching. Go check it out. Time for Your Hobbies on all major platforms. Thank you so much, Alex. It was awesome speaking to you. Did you enjoy that episode? Could you do me a personal favor and subscribe and leave a review? It would mean a lot to me. Thank you so much and have an awesome day.